welcome to the final panel for the day. My name is Robin Nunn. I'm a partner at Panelists and co-head of the banking industry group. It's such a pleasure to be in person with all of you today, and I'm excited to see so many friends and colleagues and new friends. It's been a really fantastic couple of days. We are excited to be kicking off this panel. We have five speakers today that are going to share with you their insights in this very important financial crime space. When the team and I were putting this together, we really wanted to make sure that we had a panel where we talk not just about financial crime, but also the innovation and the new developments that are happening in that space. We all are familiar with the news and know that there's been a significant rise in financial crime over recent times.
Very low again.
Some of that obviously due to
you know what? No, hold on. I need to switch the. Switch me.
So we're going to hear from each and every one, and I think that they all bring together a really unique perspective in this. I'm a big fan of fun facts, and they have allowed me to introduce them briefly before we jump into the questions. So I'm going to start with introducing Al Coe, first and foremost. Welcome, Al. Al is the Chief Executive Officer of Early Warning Service, which is the operator of Zelle payments. He has been there since 2019. Prior to EWS, he had a long career at Intuit as a product manager, general manager of personal finance app Mint, Chief Transformation Officer for that company. The fun fact about Al is that he retired from his local basketball rec league and has become an avid hiker and pickleballer. So welcome Al to the panel. Next, we have next to me Bill Hughes. He's Senior Counsel and Director of Global Regulatory Matters for ConsenSys Software, a leading Ethereum blockchain software company where he focuses on issues relating to unhosted crypto wallets, finance, and peer-to-peer networks. Bill joined ConsenSys after serving as Associate Deputy Attorney General at the Department of Justice, where, among other things, coordinated DOJ's law enforcement response to COVID-19 related fraud and money laundering. Bill began his career by clerking for a federal judge in New York and litigating with the firm Sullivan & Cromwell. Bill did not give me a fun fact, but one fun fact about Bill is that we used to work together over a decade ago at the same firm. Welcome, Bill. Next, we have David Rich. David, wave. David Rich leads product commercialization for cyber and security products at Mastercard, which spans cyber economic crime, risk disputes, and crypto services across card, ACH, and real-time networks. Over the last 10 years at Mastercard, David has held a variety of roles, creating new and differentiated data insights and analytics to customers across financial services, the public sector, and businesses, in particular, fighting various types of economic crime and advanced analytics and artificial intelligence. The fun fact for David is that David was a jackaroo on his dad's sheep and cattle farm in Australia. As a teenager, which involved a lot of cleaning up of sheep and cattle poo, and although his father used to tell him there's money to be made in cow manure, David has come to the realization that one doesn't have to wear rubber boots up to your knees to clean the money flowing in financial services. So he's happy working with us. Next we have Rich. Rich, wave. Welcome, Rich. Rich is the Chief Customer Experience Officer at Kount, an Equifax company. Rich leads the team that works with thousands of brands to fight global fraud and improve digital enablement. In the past 16 years, Rich has led technology, product operations, and is now laser focused on solving customer problems. The fun fact about Rich is Rich was raised on a dairy farm in Boise, Idaho. He will tell you, quote, "Every day fighting is better than any day on the dairy farm." Next, last but not least, we have Yuval. Welcome, Yuval. Yuval is the General Manager of Fraud and Authentication business and leads the fraud product management function for NICE Actimize. Prior to that, he was lead product manager for NICE's analytics-driven customer engagement solutions to the Fortune 500 companies. Fun fact about Yuval, in the past few years, he has become an avid runner and completed his first half marathon only a couple months ago, which helps balance his other passion, good food. Welcome to the panel. We're excited to be here. We really are going to tackle these fraud issues and risks and see what we can do in this current environment and how to make things better. We live in fast times, and fraud has obviously struck close to almost everyone's heart at this stage. So let's maybe start off with a question. So Al, Bill, David, Rich, Yuval, if you could talk from your vantage point about fraud and what you're seeing. Maybe we can start off with, when you hear the word fraud and you read the articles, what word comes to mind and why?
I think the word that comes to mind is people. And I think the lens I have is a much more people-oriented context, because it's more than debits and credits, and it's more money now. It's about all of the damage that are done to vulnerable folks and the heinous activities that fraud funds.
I think of the word ubiquity. So unfortunately, with the advent of various technologies over time, what we're seeing is an increasing amount of fraud, vectors of attack, sophistication across multiple networks, across multiple technologies. Because the people that we fight, and the ones that Rich was sort of referring to, the criminals who instigate all of this are unfortunately organised, and they don't really care about regulators, they don't really care about morals, and they don't care about laws. They just do whatever they are going to do, and they do it very efficiently. And so that level of ubiquity is only going to increase. If we have a look at, for example, about 10 or so years ago, about 1% to 2% of global GDP was illicit funds washing through the global financial system. Over the ensuing 10 or so years, it's around 4 or 5% of global GDP. And in that time frame, not only has it grown 2-3x, but the world's GDP has grown at the same time. So it's an increasingly large portion of an increasing pie, which is basically a testament to whatever we've done in the past hasn't really slowed these things down. And so innovation and the things that we'll talk about today and collaboration amongst all the participants really becomes the most and only effective way of fighting these criminals.
The word that I went with is actually grandma, which is along the lines of what Rich and David talked about. At the end of the day, it's who are we protecting. I think that yesterday during the CEO's panel, the word purpose was mentioned a lot in terms of building culture. And when I speak with fraud leaders within many of the banks that are attending here, as well as with my internal teams, the product teams, the R&D teams, the data science teams, it's a lot about beyond the value detection rates and how much money we save to the bank and reducing alerts and so on. It's who are we protecting it.
My word is scams. Just last night over dinner, we were talking about romance scams. And that's just one of many examples where, with fraud, you can more effectively try to keep people from compromising one's account. Although it's always a challenge, and I know we're going to talk a lot more about it. But with scams, particularly when more and more people interact never meeting, including deep, emotional romances, without ever actually having contact, it's a much harder problem. And the sophistication, the amount of research people can do about you, who they can claim to be, with all the tools available, makes the challenge really, really perplexing and interesting at the same time. So romance scams.
In the interest of completeness, I would say addressable. In the blockchain space, as participation grows, as you have a lot of new people coming in and experimenting the first time, it is a target-rich environment for fraudsters. That said, just like the internet, in its early days, there was a big education curve for the average user. As the internet evolved and as the average person incorporated it more and more into their daily life, their operational security naturally improved. And there's also a lot of technology that can be brought to bear that makes the job of fraudsters much more perilous. And so I say addressable.
Perfect. And just one bit of housekeeping items. We do have questions that you can enter on the app. I'm sure you all are familiar with the apps. Happy to answer those, and we'll also leave a few minutes at the end for questions from the audience. But going back to you, Bill, in terms of what are the trends and developments that you're seeing right now in the fraud space? I know that you're in sort of the crypto environment. What's going on there?
Briefly, you see a lot of scams that are prevalent in the traditional finance space, migrating over to crypto, and really where it affects is the peer-to-peer crypto, which is like what I consider pure crypto, what you think of crypto when you hear the word. It's you have a wallet and you have keys to tokens and you're in control. There are lots of people out there who want to separate you from your keys, and they do it in a number of respects. They will coax you and they will fool you to try to hand over your password or secret seed phrase, or they will invite you to connect with and interact with and give approval to some on-chain software which they will then leverage to steal your money. These are early days, and those trends are of considerable concern and importance to developers who want to create productive, useful, ubiquitous blockchain software, and also who create the software products which are going to be the tools we all use to engage in these ecosystems. And so building in safeguards, building in tools that make us smarter participants is what the industry is also doing right now. With my company, MetaMask, which is the most popular unhosted wallet in the world, the developers, in addition to building out its functionality, want to make sure it is a safe tool for everyday people to use. And that's the type of work and focus that you find in the more mature areas of the industry today.
Others, I mean, we hear about phishing, we hear about identity theft, synthetic fraud. Looks like you're about to say something, Rich.
Yeah, I think the customers that we work with, what they're experiencing is the fraudsters are now sophisticated enough, with enough automation, they're really attacking every point in the customer journey. And it doesn't matter if it's an account creation, login, loyalty, payment. There are sophisticated, highly automated attacks happening that are based on very high quality data, and it is spread all over the customer journey, and they're figuring out very creative ways and very scalable ways to monetize that fraud in situations that previously, without automation and a global attack footprint, they would not have been able to monetize that.
And just on that, actually, it's an excellent point. I totally agree. The word that comes to mind for me on this is velocity. So in addition to that, what we're seeing is the speed of the movement of funds and the speed of the actual crime and the criminal activity that's going on is mind-boggling, to be honest with you. So we see patterns of money being defrauded and going to an account and then being split up into 20 other accounts or 20 other transactions within 2 or 3 minutes. So I don't know about all of you, but when I try and transfer money on my bank app, I couldn't possibly do 20 transactions in 2 or 3 minutes. So it suggests that there's a lot of other activities going on here. And it's much, much broader than just a transaction. To Rich's point, there needs to be protections at various levels of that customer journey. And one of the other developments that we see is a lot of the funds, a lot of the fraud moves into, and we've seen this in various markets, into crypto exchanges and through crypto exchanges. So whatever the adoption is of crypto or not in the normal world, there is certainly an adoption of crypto technologies as well in the criminal world. And they move it very quickly through to the crypto exchanges, and then that goes through the blockchain, and then it comes back perhaps as an anonymous prepaid card. And that's when the victims who are being defrauded are the ones who then suffer, whether it's elder abuse or it's romance scams or it's trafficking all these horrible victims, all these horrible events, creating victims, is something that's happening with increasing frequency.
Yeah, just to add to that, first of all, I think it's fascinating that everyone is coming from a different angle, but at the end of the day, we do see the same pain points. To add to the fraud across the customer journey, what we see is also that fraudsters learn where the silos are within fraud programs and how to navigate between these silos. So, even if we take, for example, a new account opening with synthetic identity and then depositing a bad check and money out through Zelle. This typology translates to 3-4 different teams within the bank that are focused and working with different systems that not necessarily connect and see that in real time, which creates challenges, and fraudsters have learned that and are, we see a lot of fraud starting from the contact center and then moving to the digital, starting from account takeover and then moving to new account through that account takeover. So a lot of these cross-channel hops that we see.
And how would you all say that things have changed over the recent times? Obviously, I sort of mentioned that we are in unique times right now, but what concerns are you thinking about now versus perhaps you might not have been thinking about perhaps previously?
Preventing fraud in near real time, so pre-transaction. Because at the end of the day, if the fraud's going to occur, it's a bit late in a real-time payment flow to be saying after the event, let me go find that money, because we know it's going to be moved rapidly through various bank accounts, various banks, into crypto and so forth. So the best defense here is to figure out how do we stop it from occurring in the first place. And we can apply artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities cross-functionally through various mechanisms and in partnership. Because at the end of the day, one of the other things that we've learned is that the more defense mechanisms that are in place, the safer everybody is. And to have it all within one sort of entity is great for that entity perhaps, but it doesn't stop the prevalence of fraud going through various other participants in the financial sort of ecosystem. And so collaborating at a network level, at a financial institution level, at a various type of partnership level makes the most sense to augment each other as opposed to doing everything in silo or in isolation. Because to Yuval's point just a minute ago, they do understand how financial institutions are organised and structured, and they know perfectly well that there's a gap here and there's a gap there, and it's in the gaps that they play. So the more that we can partner and collaborate, the better off I think the entire ecosystem is going to be.
I love David's point about the best detection, if maybe prevention, keeping it from happening in the first place. And so consumer education works, and we've seen that the better informed and the better tools that consumers have, the lower the rates of fraud and certainly scams in the first place. But also, I love the point about utilizing data to make these decisions. I'll give you an example. Bad guys like good deals too. So anytime a bank runs a promotion of open a checking account and you get $250, you better believe it, a lot of bad guys are opening accounts, not only for the $250, but then you get a 2-for-1 because now once you're in the account, and what we see is those accounts have a higher instance of suspicious activity happening, just in the first X days than the run-of-the-mill. And so it's a fascinating thing, and I don't know that that's necessarily intuitive, but once you pick up on that pattern, what do you do about it? How do you connect it to the other capabilities that are out there to prevent fraud and scams, and then of course they'll move on to something else.
Yeah. I think that on that just last point, the data that is available today, if we look at the risk tech ecosystem, in the past few years it has been exploding with new innovation and new ways to get more trust and signals around who you're actually doing business with through the digital channels and who they are doing business with. And it's, from a technology standpoint, it can be mining the dark web, the deep web, the social media, phone intelligence, email intelligence. And really the problem, I think, becomes, and what we see when we speak with our clients is really, okay, so we have all this potential out there, but how do we really operationalize it? How do we know what really brings incremental value to what we're doing today versus just yet another shiny tool? And this is where we saw that evolving already in the past few years, and at least within Actimize, we decided that this is a strategic problem that is just going to grow further, because this ecosystem is not going to shrink. Every day we see new tools, new ways, and I think that here vendors can play a role also in terms of abstracting some of this and absorbing some of these additional intelligence in order really to make a better job in preventing fraud before it happens.
Are there particular fraud cases you all are focused on that concern you more than perhaps others right now?
I think you can cut that a number of different ways. The traditional payment fraud, although there's a lot of controls throughout the ecosystem, it is very, very common, at least in terms of attempts. And so there's a very high dollar value, and it can be quite disconcerting for both the businesses and the account holders or card holders. I think that's very, very common. I think on kind of the other end of the spectrum, payment fraud tends to be rather small, incremental losses. Then there are things like account takeover for a financial institution where it might be one bad day, but that one bad day is a giant loss in terms of both the economic value and the individual suffering it. But that's kind of the ends of the spectrum, and then there's everything in between.
Yeah, and in addition to that, there's the business fraud as well, right? So business email compromise and the various other types of vectors of attack that occur on businesses. And those tickets tend to be a lot larger. They tend to be in the hundreds of thousands. I think the last stat I saw on that one was the average ticket size was about $125,000. And several companies who are very technically advanced, West Coast USA companies, in their supply chain were with invoice redirection, we're talking to the tune of tens of millions of dollars of various types of business compromise, fraud, and invoice redirection. And the other aspect of this is it also moves through, again, it moves through very, very quickly, very, very sophisticated. I read something in the newspaper the other day, about voice, an AI voice, where deepfake has been typically associated with video and pictures, and now it's voice, so that I could be calling a colleague or someone pretending to be me, impersonating me, calling a colleague sounds exactly like me. So that now takes it to a different level, particularly on the business fraud side. So there's a number of, that's why the answer, Robin, to that question is really broad, because it just depends on where you're looking, but there's unfortunately fraud in all sorts of places.
Maybe just to add we're talking a lot about fraud and fraud, types of fraud and fraud losses, but with faster payments, I see at least more discussions with fraud leaders around customer experience. And the discussion, if in the past it was how do we prevent fraud losses, today it's more how do we improve the customer experience while containing the fraud losses. And I think that that's an interesting trend and shift that we're seeing, aligned with the bank strategy. And definitely the move to faster payments, real-time payments, is bringing that to the extreme, because you need to take a decision now in milliseconds. And if the cost of taking the wrong decision is either a loss of money or introducing unnecessary friction, so that really becomes a topic of conversation and focus. And with that, I think that the fact that we have, as an industry, matured from an AI and machine learning perspective to really know how to use that in order to bring value in real-time fraud prevention comes in a good time, because we need it. We need to be very accurate at the decisions that we're taking, and certainly as we see where we're moving with a faster payments direction.
Good point, Yuval. Let's move to a happier note. Al, can you talk to us a little bit about the mitigation measures that the industry is grappling with, and some of your experience in terms of expanding fraud prevention?
Appreciate the question. You know, first of all, it's important to start with the facts, because sometimes you read all these headlines and there are definitely, you know, sad stories every day. But the facts are, and I'll speak specifically about Zelle. Hopefully I have a room full of people who are active users of it. But you know, we do over $1 million a minute, $1.6 billion a day of volume right now. So if you think about the scale of the dollars moved and the number of transactions, more than 99.9% of those transactions go through without any incident, without any report, very, very smoothly. And that's actually a better rate than most other payment options that are out there, electronic or otherwise, by a good margin. So it's important to dimensionalize. And why is that? So I know Yuval talks a lot about, you know, AI, and I'm actually interested in learning a lot more about this. But a lot of the good outcomes are getting back to the basics. So obviously, starting, you know, behind the bank login with strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, customer education, smart friction. You know, we talk about the balance of ease of use and then friction. Smart friction, whether it's in the form of dynamic limits or when you're paying somebody new, which is actually where the issues usually occur versus a long-standing relationship between you and your landlord. Those are areas where you could preserve the bulk of the experiences, which are the repeat use cases, but make it a little harder for the new ones through a variety of those tools. All of those are capabilities at one's disposal. The one additional thing I'll say, just certainly as an industry, and I know this is mostly folks involved in the banking industry, is we need to work together, and that's something that's hard to do. They're competitors. There's all kinds of questions around users and privacy and all of that. But you know, one of the things about early warning and why it operates a Zell network is for 30 years, we have the great benefit of having, we call the national shared database, but visibility into the vast majority, over 80% of the DDAs in this country through a give to get model. And so with that, there's a lot you can do that's just basic information if you can see across everyone's account for the purposes of fraud detection and keeping bad guys out at account opening, at check deposit, and certainly in P2P payments. So it's really just a layer cake, but a lot of things are the basics, but it's actually the basics sometimes that you know, we need to beef up.
And Bill, you've talked a little bit about the crypto landscape and what you've been seeing. How do you see it evolving, and what do you expect in, you know, the coming years?
It's a broad question. I think we've already started to see the power that blockchain analytics software has in a pseudonymous ledger environment, that where transactions go back to the beginning of time and are there for anybody to analyze. In the last year, you saw a very colorful couple, that had years ago hacked an exchange and kept the spoils of that crime in a wallet, and it had to sit there. They couldn't do anything with it. It was a lot. They tried to move it years later, and they were arrested like within a week. So to commit crimes on chain is a very dangerous proposition if you ever want to have a good night's sleep again in your life. It grows more complex as the number of chains proliferate and as the technology evolves. The fact that everything can be traced and can be traced with off-the-shelf software to some extent requires the development of privacy-saving software, which allows everyday illicit use that comes with with less transparency into what you're doing. However, you got to reconcile that with the ability to find the bad actors when you can see their illicit transactions as crystal clear on chain. I would say a big question that is going to be called as early as this fall when somebody sues the United States Treasury is under what circumstances can you prohibit otherwise legal use of on-chain software which is no longer controlled or changeable by anyone. You may be aware that OFAC sanctioned a mixer called Tornado Cash. They sanctioned not only the front-end website interface that people could use, and they not only sanctioned effectively this loose association of developers, but they sanctioned actual addresses on the Ethereum blockchain, some of which contain software which is no longer changeable. It's there. You can visit it today, and nothing stops you. And so OFAC says if any American uses any one of these addresses for a transaction, that's a sanctions violation. There's a number of problems with that. We can expect OFAC to be sued over it. The question, however, is if I'm not operating a business, I'm just writing code and I upload it to the blockchain for anybody in the world to use, am I responsible for how people use it? Can other people be held accountable for using that software which is otherwise up there? Under what authorities can such activity be restricted? These are like the fundamental questions which confront the blockchain space, which confront law enforcement, which confront regulators generally. And we are very focused on what we call CFI, centralized finance exchanges, rightfully so. They are the off-ramps. You want to go find people who've stolen money and laundered it through crypto or stolen crypto and trying to get out. You go to the off-ramps, and that has been the focus to date, rightfully so. But the bigger, more thornier question is how does one regulate a peer-to-peer system which is intermediated by software, which anyone can write, anyone can put up, and anyone can use as long as you can talk to the system. We don't know how to answer that question. And so I think we're starting to turn our gaze toward those thornier issues in the next 12 months. And that's what ConsenSys is going to be turning its attention to help regulators and law enforcement and the like puzzle through those questions.
David, over to you. I'll try and ask a more narrow question. Any response to what Bill said or how common are scams actually?
So scams are very, very common, and I think that's why it was sort of raised a bit earlier. And they're prevalent, and they're continuing to be prevalent. And I think we've discussed some of those issues. Some of the other things that we've been seeing as well is cyber attacks. So a lot of the fraud that occurs is related to a cyber attack of some sort, or a cyber fraud-related event as well. So they're usually connected. In Europe and in various other legislations, the regulated financial institutions are going to have to monitor the cyber exposure of critical suppliers because that's another vector of attack. I get in somehow, technically into one of your critical suppliers, and then I can use that as a Trojan horse, so to speak, to be able to figure that out, to get in and maneuver around and cause a lot of concern and cause a lot of fraud as well. So there's those vector of attacks that we need to sort of understand and how do we handle cyber security. And then on the crypto side, a lot of financial institutions are grappling with crypto in various countries, and here obviously in the United States there's been a lot of conversations about that. One of the aspects there is to understand what is your exposure to crypto, because how much of your funds are actually being transferred, legitimately or otherwise, into crypto and then back, and are you aware of that? Because if I was in Asia recently in a country where it's illegal to do crypto, and so my immediate question to a room full of bankers was, are you comfortable that no one's taking money out of the bank, out of your bank and putting it into an American crypto wallet? And they said, no, we're not comfortable with that at all. I said, okay, so you might ban crypto in this particular country, but at the end of the day, if you're a fraudster, you can still move that money out via crypto exchanges. So it's an area that we all need to understand, because these vectors of attack are not just proliferating in their normal traditional ways, scams are becoming more sophisticated, more frequent, but also the vectors of attack spanning cyber, supply chains, as well as identification, authentication, verification processes. In every step of that journey, we need to be vigilant. And again, doing that together is a much better, has a much better potential outcome than if we all do it individually.
And Rich, over to you. We've talked a little bit about collaborationships and partnerships and all sorts of other things at the conference. How is that evolving in this space?
I think the industry is getting better, but it's like the old joke about what's the largest room in the world. It's the room for improvement. And I firmly believe that all the data to solve our fraud problems exists and is available, but one of the big problems is that it's available in the wrong place at the wrong time. So were we to improve the connectivity, the collaboration, and the willingness to share data appropriately, such that each touch point in the ecosystem could apply the AI and machine learning, could appropriately apply real-time policies, could appropriately make sure that what they think is happening with this given event in a customer journey is in fact what is happening, I think we would make a tremendous amount of progress.
And last but not least, Yuval, how is Nice Actimize sort of looking at this, and how are you dealing with the evolving face of fraud right now?
So I think that, in light of the challenges that we shared here, and I touched upon it a bit before about this really the connected ecosystem. How do we make it easier for our clients to consume this intelligence which is out there, to have the data in the right time, in the right moment, and how to do that when you need to take a decision in milliseconds, right? Which the tech folks here will tell you that it's a real challenge. So this is why we, a couple of years back, we started the concept of a marketplace, where we are bringing or leveraging also our unique position in the ecosystem to bring on board partners and integrate with them. I've been personally speed dating, what feels like speed dating, many startups and fintech companies in the past couple of years, and really saw and learned and vetted also what they can bring to the table, and we're collaborating with them and working with them. I really just add to your point before on playing better together. Only this morning I got feedback from my data science team that the risk signals from the recent version of early warnings that we've integrated into our models showed a great uplift. So well done there.
Appreciate it.
So that's just one anecdote, but essentially really playing better together and investing, understanding that this investment that goes beyond just specifically our clients, but with the ecosystem, is something that at the end of the day will make us all better.
And that raises a great point, Al. How is Zell managing fraud on its platform?
Well, I touched on some of the multi-layered approach, starting with education, starting with a better data sharing between the institutions, faster reporting, all of these things that are making a difference and steadily reducing the rates of fraud and scams. But given the volumes, it's obviously there's more we can do, and so this is where significant investment in really identifying, not just at the what we call the token level, which is your cell phone number, email address, but at the account level and ultimately at the identity level. And once you start to try to take action at that level, it does require an unprecedented amount of collaboration between institutions that, frankly, hasn't happened before. And so these are the types of things we're working through. Then there's governance questions and all of the rest. But I'm confident that everyone takes the problem seriously, so we're making progress one step at a time.
That's great. Any other comments from the panel?
I think that the topic of information sharing, or I call it intelligence sharing, because a lot of the time, especially for fraud, you don't need the data, you need the intelligence. I agree that it's a topic that we are talking and hearing a lot about. I do feel that there are some winds of change, slowly. But at the end of the day, this, if we're looking to change the paradigm of how the financial industry is fighting fraud today, sharing and being able to use that in real time in order to prevent fraud, that really will be the next step.
And a lot of that doesn't require personally identifiable information. And a lot of that doesn't require the full transaction data element, whether it's 20022 or 8583. It's a subset. So for those sort of in the audience who are sort of familiar with that, a lot of what we need generally to identify fraudulent behaviour in near real time is a subset of the overarching transaction. And so we can mask it, we can encrypt it, we can tokenize it, we can do all sorts of different things for the purpose of permissible use to stop more victims from being victimised by the fraudsters. And we all want to stop elder abuse, and we all want to stop trafficking and terrorist financing. There's no good outcome of fraud. So collectively, as a society, we want to stop all fraud because of its very nature. And to do that is, for the permissible use of stopping fraud, is a noble cause. It's a good cause. We want to help that. And so to the extent that we can collaborate and adhering to the regulatory environments and making sure we're not sharing personally identifiable information and we're not sharing all these different aspects, but we can do it in a reasonable, managed way in near real time, that is really what the onus should be for us in financial services and in this ecosystem.
And a question from the audience is, what should enterprises be looking for when it comes to anti-fraud solutions and partners? Anyone want to take that?
I can start and feel free to chime in. But I think that, considering all the challenges that we see and the reality of fraud, that today's challenges are not tomorrow's challenges. So when I would look at a fraud vendor or partner, I would look at someone that will enable me to react fast and evolve over time and adapt as the reality is going to adapt. I think that's has proven extremely important, especially in the past few years, where pretty much overnight banks had to change their offerings and fraud teams had to enable that and support that. I also think that the flexibility of, especially with enterprises that have also data science development in-house capabilities, to have a partner that can be flexible with you and give you the optionality of something you want to develop maybe your own, something you want to have the partner developing. So having these choices is extremely important, and also what we discussed before, someone that can bring the market perspective and essentially let you not learn only from your mistakes, but from others' mistakes and what to do and what not to do. So having some systematic way of really producing the intelligence that is being collected outside within your organization.
I would add that I would go back to one of my earlier comments. Think about the customer journey and know that you're going to have to protect that entire journey, whether it's physical or digital or some combination of the two, and that you'll need to have the appropriate level of sensors and the appropriate level of controls in each of those touch points. And then I would also say that data transparency is I think very beneficial, because this can enable your internal teams to understand the data that your provider might be operating on, and the intelligence that your provider is generating, and then you can use that for the other beneficial, permissible use cases that you have. And then the last thing that I would say is whether or not you do do business around the globe, fraud is guaranteed to be a global problem. Meaning you might be a domestic business, but you're being attacked from parts unknown, frankly. So you have to have a global provider.
And we're down to our last 5 minutes. I want to give the audience a chance to ask questions. Also, too, I can keep peppering them with fraud and hopefully no more dad jokes. But if there's anyone who has a question that hasn't been answered, please feel free to raise your hand and we will recognize you. Okay, seeing no questions, I'll turn it back over to you. Al, tell us a little bit more about some specific examples as far as some of the risk mitigation that you're seeing in your systems.
Maybe I'll make a little bit different comment if that's okay, because I think I talked about some of the risk mitigation and the collaboration that occurs and could happen even more so, and of course there's sensitivity there. But I believe there needs to be more enforcement. So law enforcement, that's something we can't do, but there needs to be a lot more because very often we know who the bad guys are, we even know where they live, but somebody needs to go knock on their door, so to speak. And so I think beefing that up is both a deterrent, but also puts people away. Similarly, there needs to be just a much greater investment in on all parts, and whether it's private industry or whether it's the government, in really knowing your customer. And so, the thing we try to say with Zell and the consumer education in the app is make sure you know who you're paying, right? Make sure you know. But when you think about all the different types of money that moves out there, particularly from the government, unemployment benefits, PPP loans, etc., the level of checking before the money is sent, I think that could be beefed up, and if that happens, we'd sure save a lot of money, save a lot of heartache, and hopefully then put a lot of bad guys out of business.
Ooh, that's controversial.
So 2 points to that. I completely agree with the law enforcement point. Something that I observe in my practice at ConsenSys is that if we get an inquiry from a foreign law enforcement agency, they have to go through the MLAT process to get information from us about a transaction. Somebody came to the local police in Singapore or the national police in France, and they were robbed, and they need to ask us if we have any data, and it's our purpose not to have much data on any MetaMask user. But we can't even respond. We can't, to the extent we had anything useful for criminal investigation. They have to go to DOJ, ask mother may I, DOJ has to process it, get a judge to sign it, and then they serve us with a subpoena. No one's doing that. So if you're going to operate in this country and you have data that could be reachable through proper judicial process, the current framework is so laborious that most investigations don't even get off the ground. That's point 1. Point 2 is, God help us if we're in a future where more KYC is the solution. Crypto is based on the idea that we should do as little as possible to know stuff about you before you transact. The problem, obviously, is, well, how do we go after the bad actors? There are a number of ways to do it that people are experimenting with, including digital identity, where you are known once and no one else needs to know who you are, and the fact you're known once, you can demonstrate to people secretly, so no one has to know who you are, but you've proven your identity and you've proven that your counterparty has some faith that they're interacting with you. Sharing your data with the entire world, even if it's all under the best of intentions and under, swearing to secrecy, we know that that's a problem. And plussing up on that, the folks in my industry are trying a different approach. So we'll see how it goes.
David, anybody disagree? More law enforcement, is that?
Well, I think it is safe to say that the target is the criminals, and how we get there is up for debate. But the cure cannot be worse than the disease, and the ideas around how we protect each of our individual businesses is vital, because any loss that business A takes funds the attackers against the rest of us. And I think we have to take it a little more personally, that if we're not protected to the best extent possible, we are funding malicious activity that's hurting all of us.
I would love to go on, but we have to wrap it up, unfortunately. Thank you all for an outstanding panel. Thank you all for joining us.